Hare Krishna. Sorry to have abandoned you. I have a wedding to perform on Wednesday, and I had to meet with the family and do a kind of rehearsal upstairs and make sure everyone understands what's going to happen. So that takes a little work. And I was missing you. And it was so nice to come down here and feel the environment. You're just hearing it chanting. It's a real refuge. I just feel it coming down the stairs, and then when I walked in here, you're all absorbed in hearing Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a heartfelt pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. We have New Year's coming, please by the sun calendar. And I had mentioned previously that I have some advice about goal setting. And it's also a very auspicious process to write your goals, your intentions, your priorities, and offer them. I especially have a refuge when certain events in my life, when I'm endeavoring to step to a new level of service, I go to Prabhupada's Samadhi, as we did today, and also to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Samadhi, which we're going to do on the 1st, I believe. As that's perfect timing, so if we have some sense of purpose and our goals set up before we go there, as we did last year, the devotees gathered around Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who's present there, and read their goals and asked for his blessings. How's that sound? Okay. Do we have oxygen in this room, or is it? They're all open? Is there any oxygen outside? No? Motivated said no. There's no oxygen. Take a nice fresh breath of smog. How nice. Okay. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramilitam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapajantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Uta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Tam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Rijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindho, Dinabandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Rishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye, Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Nitai Namine Che Namirhate Shadamulyenam Dite Chere Nitai Namine Che Namirhate Shadamulyenam Dite Chere Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. A few suggestions for starting the new year with clear direction. One is to write your priorities. Take some time by yourself. I recommend using a legal pad and a pen. And give yourself an hour, if you can, at least, to write down what's most important. Priority means what's most important. Come up with a list and then look at the list and see, are these priorities in order? Which one would I move higher to the top? What will I put at the very top of the list? What's most important in my life in general, not just for the new year, but what is my ultimate goal? What is topmost on the list? And just thinking about it now as I'm saying it, how does it make you feel? Good? Do you have any competing thoughts as you maybe in a cursory way are thinking about what should go on top, and any competition between ideas of what would go at the top? I felt that too. And when I wrote my priorities, it was during the pandemic, and I found myself thinking about it a lot and even discussing it. I'd talk about it with Nirkula, and when we're going for walks, and say which one's more important, what gets moved up to the top. Is it being ready for the time of death, or is it developing love for Krishna? What might it be? And then there are many other priorities you may have in your life. I suggest write them all down and then think about it. What goes where? Just the act of doing it makes one more focused, because you realize that you can choose what's most important. And once you have a clear idea of what's most important to you and you've committed to it, your life moves in that direction. And you'll leave some things behind. One of the ways that we get drawn into wasting time is because we're not really clear about what we want to do. And Alice in Wonderland, I think it was the cat. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And that means you can do anything, it doesn't really matter. So that's the first thing in general. Take some time to write your priorities, and even if you don't have an hour, just start thinking about it and jotting down on a piece of paper somewhere what your main priorities in life, and things will come up. So, oh, I forgot to put this there. Put everything. You can write 20 of them if you want. And then later on you can winnow out the ones that you don't need or that may be redundant. And then try to find a hierarchy, and by that you'll get a lot of clarity. Any questions about that before I go into the next section? Yes, Shastrada Sharpada.
You were mentioning the main goal, not only in the context of the upcoming year, or main priority. I had a quick question about that. Oftentimes, in order to attain that priority, or in order to maintain that priority, there are a lot of sub-priorities, so to say, that need to be accomplished in order to attain that goal. For example, if someone was to put like I want to get Krishna prema, but I would need to put a lot of priorities below that as well in order to attain that.
Yes.
How would I go? How
So
should I
this
go doing that?
this is an exercise of generalizing. So these have big categories. The subtopics can come into your goal list, which I'm going to go into now. Now you have a clear idea what's most important to me. That's what priorities is about, is writing down what is most important to me. And then you can deal with it in your goal list, which I'll talk about now. What other reflections or questions? Yes, Shrikar.
I found that a lot of material goals conflict with spiritual goals.
Can you give an example?
Yes. I can either advance in my career or go to Harinam. And so there's it's really conflicting for me.
Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, learn to be you. And if you look at the lives of successful devotees, you'll find that they have some balance. They're able to perform whatever duties they're doing in a way where they can stay healthy. Krishna says, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Don't recreate too much, but don't forget to recreate sometimes, to recreate yourself. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little, don't sleep too much. The idea of yukta is finding a balance in your life. So if you can find out what your priorities are, then that starts to adjust the equation. There's always an equation, means you've got, at least in California, we get 24 hours in a day. And you can count, how many am I using for this or that or the other thing? And you can adjust it. It's not all one thing or all another thing. So if you have a career, that's quite natural. Unless you become a brahmachari, and then you're going to also major in something. Everyone has their duties to do in life in various ways, and it doesn't prohibit you from adding in what you need to be Krishna conscious. Yes? So it's a matter of proportion. That's what I'll get into in a minute. Yeah.
So just a technical question. So are priorities more like overarching goals, like I want to live a life that's comfortable enough to practice my devotion, or are priorities meant to be out of the context of just the year?
They're huge categories, but what's the overarching purpose of your life? What are the things that are most important to you in this lifespan that you have right now? It's kind of like when you do a strategic plan, you start with a vision mission. Why am I doing this in the first place? And what does it look like when I'm successful? Those are vision mission ideas. And the priority list is fun. Don't make it arduous or difficult. And there may be overlapping ideas here or there, but don't worry about it. It's not so precise that if you accidentally state something in a way that sounds more like a goal, or the goal sounds more like a priority, you can play with it. It's your life. But the way I look at it, I notice that organizations that hold together have a sense of purpose. Look at the United States. Even if it appears to be going to hell in a handbasket right now, at least they know that it is, because they have a constitution. It's written. I've seen it. It's in Washington, D.C. in the Library of Congress. It's on the wall. Somebody took the time. There was a conference. People came together, really smart people, and they said, what do we want? And they wrote it all down. They thought about it, and they wrote it as precisely as possible about what a good country would look like. What were their main goals and priorities for the country, right? Seen the Constitution? And before that, there was the Magna Carta, which was, people said, I don't like the way our lives are going, so let's talk about what we really want to do. They wrote it down. So the way I conceive of it is, each one of us has our own life to organize. And what better way to organize than have your own constitution? Would you like to write a constitution and put it on the wall? And then if somebody says, hey, how about let's do this? And you say, how about let's not? Because it's not in the Constitution, unless you want to write an amendment to the Constitution. But that way, you're self-guided. And if you're not self-guided, then somebody else will just take over your life. And part of that will just be fear. So you're afraid to do certain things, or you're guilty because you're not doing enough. But the more you're able to decide on what's most important to you and write it down and decide what your own life's going to be, I really do recommend making a constitution and put it on your wall. And then say, this is how I live. This is what's most important to me. Okay, yes. Ram, you okay? Feeling better? Good.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Oftentimes it's easy to write, or not easy, but not too hard to write down goals, especially when there's a lot of motivation. But my material conditioning is very strong in the way that I currently am. It's hard to change that. So my question is, how do you develop the conviction to stick by that constitution that you have written on your wall, that this is how I'm going to be now, and that can be kind of an abrupt change, and maybe like 6 months later you're like, oh, I've deviated from this constitution. And so my question is, how do you develop conviction to stick by that constitution that you establish for yourself to overcome your conditioning?
Somebody look up the word conviction. And we'll see what we're trying to get. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're having technical difficulties with our research department. They need more funding, apparently.
Conviction comes from the mid-15th century, meaning the proving or finding of guilt of an offense charged. From late Latin, convictionem, nominative convictio, proof, refutation.
And what's the other one?
Noun of action from past
Say it again so I can hear it go.
Noun of action from past participle stem of convincere, to overcome decisively.
To overcome decisively. So how can you develop that sense of overcoming decisively? Latin, obviously, right? Any other breakdown of the words? Huh?
Oh, I missed another one, sorry. It means mental state of being convinced or fully persuaded, from the 1690s, that of firm belief, a belief held as proven. And another breakdown of the word is come, which is an intensive prefix, and vincere is to conquer.
Convincere. To conquer.
Together. Like, calm means together. also
Okay.
convinces.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami says, Siddhanta Bulya Chitanakara Alash, Iha Hoite Krishna Loge Sudrid Manosh. Which means that to be very convinced about something, you have to evaluate it. Siddhanta is to be very clear. To have a siddhanta means to be very clear about a point. And you know what it is, and you also know what it isn't. It's very precise. And he says, Nakara alash, don't be lazy about deciding what's important to you, or what's. He's saying, if they're opposing thoughts, discuss them carefully and find out what's most important. And then, Iha hoite Krishna lage sudrid manash. The sudrid means that your mind becomes convinced. Manash means mind. When you've discussed it, when you've evaluated what's most important to you, then you can have a strong mind that can conquer over the tendency to do what's less important. And Narada Muni gives an example of this in the 7th canto, when he's describing to Vasudeva, he's teaching Vasudeva, and he tells him as an example, he said, if you want to overcome a greed for wealth, then study wealth and see what a burden it is. You get money, you have to figure out where to park it so you don't get it all taken away. And it will get taken away one way or another. And he said, study the anomalies of wealth, and therefore you won't be greedy and think, now I have 1 million, but that's not enough, I got to have 5 million, and so on. It goes on forever. So it's in coming to a clear idea of consequences. And also just say, as a practice, writing goals is so powerful because you took the time to decide something that you want. Thoughts start in the lower chakra here. This is in the Bhagavatam. And then they proceed up through these different energy centers, and they become more clear to us. They come as a subtle feeling, and then they come into the thought world. And when they come to here, there's a chakra here, that's when you voice it. So desires, subtle thoughts, and then they get voiced. And then you say it. And once you say it, especially if you put it on the internet, it's practically impossible to take back. What's happened is you've manifested something, an idea, a thought, and then it's come from subtle and then it becomes grossified. And when you write it down, when you sit down, this is no ordinary thing. To sit down and decide what's important to you, right, as a goal. And so what if you're still have proclivities in another direction? This will start pulling you. And there's an uncanny way in which, at least I can say, just anecdotal from my life. I wrote, when I was a brahmachari for 13 years. And I started when I was 16, and I got married when I was 29. And when I was 29, I said, I got to decide how I'm going to organize my life. So I wrote down a whole list of goals. I hadn't seen my parents that much because I was mostly in ashrams and traveling around the world. I stopped in their house on my way to at their house on the way to India, and I had my goal list. It was just written on a piece of paper, and I accidentally left it there. I remember my father wrote me, and they were being protective of me because I'd never really interacted with the world that much. I just went right into the ashram. I was fully absorbed. And then I had all these, what looked to them, super ambitious goals, and they probably were. And they were trying to help me balance my life and saying, maybe these aren't, don't expect that much from the world. It may be too much what you've put here. And I remember several years later, after that, they gave me the paperback when I saw them the next time. But then when I went through the list some years later, I realized that I achieved everything on it. And I started thinking about how there's a subconscious force when you decide what you want and you write it down, it starts to manifest. And then even if you're going in a different direction, if you keep reminding yourself what your goals are, and that's one of the points I'll make about goal setting, is to keep it visible. In fact, right now, back at our home, I have been composing goals for the last several weeks, and I have them on a big post-it board, those ones that you can pull off that people use at seminars. I have those on my wall. And recently when I was stewing about something, and then I looked at the goal sheet and I say, oh yeah, that's where I'm going, not here. And it pulls you along. So it's the first step. And unless you decide which way you're going, then your mind will just take you in any direction. Okay, on to the practical aspects of goal setting. Ready? Yes. Okay, here's the mantra for goal setting, and it's really simple. And if you remember this mantra and you work with this directive, I guarantee you'll be successful. That's all you really need. Should I say it? Yes. Decide what you want and write it down. That's it. Decide what you want and write it down. If you keep it simple, there's a way in which you'll do it. And another point about writing goals is to write them in the present tense. As an example, the present tense. I read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam in the next 5 years. I walk 2 miles a day. I chant with attention. I chant my japa every day with attention. That's in the present tense. I do. I'm not I will do. You write it as if it's right now. It's happening at this very moment. Because there's a way in which when you read that, your mind takes it as, yeah, this is what I do. So write it in the present tense. Is that clear? Next is break large goals down into small tasks. This may sound simplistic, but it's extremely powerful. I think I talked about this at GEV as far as reading goes. But anything that you take on as a goal has simple parts to it. And if you feel overwhelmed by any particular goal and you can't get started, then think of what's the next step I have to take, the simplest next step I have to take that I can move towards it. And there's usually a step that seems daunting that you don't want to do, maybe like somebody you have to talk to, and I don't want to talk to that person. So what would you do before that to get to that point? In other words, break it down into the simplest steps that you can take towards it, and then keep taking simple steps. And whatever seems large, see what the parts are that you can break it down into so you can move towards it. Next is very important, and that is to make your goals visible to yourself. I don't recommend sharing them with everybody, because as soon as you start telling everybody what you're going to do or what your goals are, there's a sense they might there's two things can happen. I mean, there's probably more than that, but in general, someone might say, oh, you could never do that. I mean, you've told me before you were going to do something and you didn't do it. They might try to discourage you. On the other side, they might say, oh, that's really great. And then you'll have this subtle feeling like, well, I'm already getting the reward for telling them I'm going to do it, so I don't really have to do it. And so it's better just to do it and surprise people that you've done it rather than go around telling everybody what you're going to do. And if you realign yourself with what you decided you're going to do by keeping it visible, and you keep looking at it, like post it somewhere, have it somewhere where you can review it. It may be tedious and your mind may resist when you say, I'm going to read it every day. Some people say rewrite it every day. That could be difficult because the mind gets strong and says, oh, we already did this. But at least if you have it and you can glance at it and remember, I have a purpose. I decided what I'm going to do. It draws you in that direction because of it. The other is, as you're moving forward, don't be afraid to adjust them if you need to. If you set something that's way too ambitious and you need to break it down and make it simpler so that you feel encouraged, then do that. Main point is to keep moving in the right direction. And here's one of the parts that gets into, it's a lot of fun, and it's also helps you to see what you're doing in your life, is to break down your life into categories. Try to figure out how many categories you have in your life that are important. Examples, here's a few. Your spiritual goals. What would you say some of your spiritual goals are? If you're going to just name a category. Japa. What else? Huh? Verse memorization. Reading. Book distribution. There's a lot you could put, right? And that's just one aspect of your life. And then what about family? Is family important? Yeah. So what would you say could be some goals for your family? Be nice? Oh, I don't know about that. What? Somebody said something, I cut him off. What were you saying about family? Huh? Yeah, take some time. Some quality time with those who you live with that are your closest allies in your life. What else? Yes? Be a good devotional example. That's the best way to teach. Actually, they say it's the best way to teach. No, it's the only way to teach. So you can meditate on these. You break your life and then think of a couple more. Professional. Does anybody here have professional life or professional ambitions? Yeah. When you make that's a category, and then you'd make goals under that. What would you do for your professional life, for instance? Maybe you need another certificate or something like that to prove that you're up to date on something. Whatever it is, you can put that in. How about health and fitness? Is that important? Yeah. Did Prabhupada prioritize that? What did he do? He walked every day. What else? Got massaged twice a day. He said it was yoga for old people. He also was meticulous about his diet. He ate simply, and it had to be hot and it had to be on time. So there's a lot of things you can do for health and just integrate it into your life, because it's a priority that Krishna gave you this body, and you should take care of it. You don't have to be fanatical, but you have to take care of it. Okay, here's another one of my favorites, is various time frames. So goals, you may say, well, goal for what? A goal for a year? But what about setting a goal for 1 minute? Have you ever done that? 1 minute goals are extremely powerful. You say, what's my goal for the next 60 seconds? And you may conquer procrastination by doing this, which is big news, because every organ of the body has a tendency to shut down and rest when it's not being used. It's just preservation of energy. And if we're not in a peak state, then we tend to also sort of power down. And sometimes it's hard to power up again. Have you ever had that experience? Like me, constantly. So there's a way in which if you set a 1-minute goal, say in the next 60 seconds, here's what I'm going to achieve. You can do it because you think 1 minute, anybody can do that. And then once you start moving, you're going in the right direction. How about an hour-long goal? 1 hour. If you could stick to something for an hour and actually go for it. 1 day. How about 1 day, everything I speak, I'll follow Krishna's directives in the Bhagavad Gita for the austerities of speech. How about 1 day I won't say or ah or like. I don't know, make up your own. But there are plenty of directives in the Shastra and plenty of ways in which we want to improve, right? So try for a day and see what happens. When we used to have these japa retreats, one of the days was a day of only chanting, no talking. And that was the scariest part for most people of coming to the seminars, because everything else is fine, but how can I just stop talking for a day? But afterwards, everyone said, why didn't I think of this before? I'm wasting so much time talking and then waiting for the other person to react. It was just such a peaceful day and so forth. You can change your life in 1 day if you decide that you're going to try something that's progressive and you work on it. How about a 30-day goal? This is my favorite one, the 30-day goal. It's like Kartik. You can really move to another level spiritually if you say, during this time, I'm going to be more deliberate about the way I do my practice. I'm going to, for instance, not miss Mangalartik for 1 month, or whatever you pick. Everyone has a different ambition according to, but the 30-day goals, it's something you know it's only for 30 days, so you can really put in, but after 30 days, you really develop a samskar for it. How about 1 year goal? How about a 5-year goal? You can make some sound to give your consent or say, no, this is not good. 10-year goal. 10 years goes by fast. How about a 100-year goal? You start getting, say what? And where will you be in 100 years from now? You'll be back to Godhead. Yes. Yes, you may.
I know the fact is death can come at any time. So when we structure our goals, do things change considering we don't know when we'll pass? Like let's say a 10-year goal. We have no guarantee we'll be here in 10 years. So how do we think about a goal in that way?
Well, when your disciples find it, they'll carry it out. They'll say, oh, this is what Guru Maharaj wanted. So let's do it. Yeah, all of you, every one of you. That's what you're working towards, is to be a servant of Krishna in a way to deliver others. And so if you have your life together and you know where you're going, then other people will be able to get empowered by you and see by your example that this is very... And, Prabhupada didn't finish all his goals. He had so many goals that he left behind. And what's everybody doing? They're building a TOVP over here. Because he wrote it on his wish list. He said, this is what I want. And now somebody came forward and said, I'm going to help you do it. And these are... living entities are powerful. We're part of God. We have that power. Our consciousness is creative. So we don't want to waste it. Throw it down a black hole somewhere and just look at something that's random or something where somebody's trying to influence us, for profit. So if we become focused on what's actually important, it'll carry through. Any other points or questions? Yes. We have a phone? Yeah. Hare Krishna. Tech support on aisle 1.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Sometimes when you have a goal, you tend to procrastinate. And like if I have a goal for today and I'm like too tired or too lazy, then I'll say I'll do it tomorrow, and that keeps like going on and on. So how do we approach that?
The way I approach it is to break it down to the smallest possible fragment that I can do. And there's a science in Japan called Aikagi. There's a psychologist who wrote a book about it, and he practices it with his patients. So he tells a story. He's had several stories, but here's one. There was a woman that he was counseling, and she was about 400 pounds overweight. And if he had told her, you have to start running on a treadmill or working out or something like that, she just wouldn't have been able to do it at the time, psychologically or physically. So he told her, because her problem was she sat and watched TV all day and ate. And so he said, every time a commercial comes on, then just stand up, and then you can sit back down again. And she thought, that was a high hill for her to climb, actually. So then she tried it, and she stepped up every time a commercial came on the television. And then when she was able to accomplish that, he said, now, this week, that was like a few weeks she took her to be able to do that. And now when you stand up, just sort of walk in place during the commercial. And she was really proud of herself that she was able to do that after some time. She came to the point of doing that. And he got her step by step in these really tiny little vows that she would make to start walking around the block. And then you can kind of intuit the way the story's going to go. It became more, she had more and more momentum. So what I do when it seems overwhelming is I break it down into something smaller and do what I can with what I have right then. And if it's so small that it seems absurd that anybody could do that, that's a good place for it to be. In fact, when I teach book distribution seminars, one of the things, people come for the part where I'm training inside the temple. I say, now we're all going to go out together. And I started noticing that there would be 50 people there for the learning part. And then when it was time to go out the door, I go, where'd everybody go? I found out that their mom called them and needed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So they had to go home. And it would take them all day to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for their mom. And so what I started doing was saying, we're not going out to distribute books. And people look at me like, no, we are. And I say, no, I don't want you to distribute books. You can't. No book distribution. We're just going out the door. That's all we're going to do. And when we get to the place that we've assigned for ourselves, all we're going to do is one thing, and that is touch the pavement with our foot. And once you do that, you're done for the day. Everybody knows this, right? That we do this. In fact, there are communities now, they still send me pictures. We touch the pavement. The whole group standing there with their foot on the pavement. I say, anything you do after that, that's extra. Not required, no performance necessary. And I find that when you lower the bar so it's on the ground and people look at it and say, well, anybody could do that, that's a good place for it to be. And so in our lives, when we're trying to move forward with something, if we manage our expectations of ourselves and give ourselves a way just to step forward, any one step forward, it can be so encouraging, because then you feel, okay, I'm moving. I might as well take another step too. This is too easy. Give me a little more. And I noticed also that in the beginning, sometimes those simple things, after a while, the devotees want more challenge. Prabhupada wrote to Karundar when he told him about managing an organization, that he said you should always create a fresh challenge so that the devotees will want to rise up and meet it. And at ISV for years, we gradually developed goals. At first they were so tiny that when we look back we think, well, how was it even so small? But we celebrated every event. Like I remember Malini Devi Dāsa, who was the co-Sankirtan leader there, had distributed one book, and she called me up. It was 9 o'clock at night. I was just going for a walk, and she said, I sold a book. And we stood there for 5 minutes celebrating that she had sold a book. And that's how it went. And then now, I mean, the goal for ISV for the last couple of months was to sell 78,000 Bhagavad Gitas in a few months. And how did they get there? Just a little bit at a time, little increases, making a fresh challenge, for the next level. And then pretty soon, you're at a much higher level, but birds fly in the sky as high as they're able, but the sky's unlimited. So when can you say, I'm at my level? We do it so we can keep increasing our capacity, and that capacity can always be increased. The quality, the way we do our devotional service, the way we interact with others, it can always be refined, and that's what makes life interesting. What makes life boring and depressing is when we feel that we're stuck and we're not improving, and we just feel, what's the use? So Krishna will help us if we very intentionally make these goals, and then we do them at the pace that we can handle. Does that help? Okay. A couple last points. Now, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. So, this first line, disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal of life is Krishna. Once we're going in that direction, Krishna says, Gyatva mam shantam richati. Otherwise, we'll have this nagging feeling that we're wasting our lives. Just remember, goals are very potent, and take a chance. Even if you think, I said them before, I couldn't keep up with it, it doesn't mean you can't do it now. And remember, once you make the commitment towards it, that's when you get the energy and the intelligence how to do it. And I'll just leave with this quote. This is from W.H. Murray, who was the first one to ever ascend Mount Everest and reach the highest level. That's before there was high-tech equipment. No one had ever done it before. He said, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that should never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no person could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Just think of Prabhupada. he was really bold. He had a plan, and he just executed and got on a ship and came to America, and one thing after another. And I've seen his little notebook. I have one just like it. I probably pointed this out the other day. He carry it whenever Prabhupada had goals, he wrote them down, and you can see them in his notebook, the ideas that he had. And people might have looked at it. People did look at his goals and say, that's impossible. Besides that, you're elderly, you have no support, how are you going to do it? But everything's possible. So it's one of the ways to make your life exciting and progressive. And if you apply it in your devotional service and all the supporting roles that you have for your devotional service, then you'll find that you're not the same next month as you were. You don't have to be, or next year. You can drastically improve. This is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, krame krame. You go from a neophyte devotee and you can rise to the platform of Uttama Adhikari. That's something in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that we're expected to rise to the next level, and then the next after that. There's a class of people who say that it's impossible for anybody to make any advancement, therefore only Prabhupada is valid. And he's the only Uttamadhikari, nobody else could become advanced like that. But Vedavyas writes in the Vedanta Sutra that the Shastra is telling you should become an Uttamadhikari. Therefore, that means you can become one. And you just have to chart your course and go in that direction. Any final questions or reflections? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Sometimes I set goals that I don't know how to quantify. For example, I want to change something with my mindset or develop a quality within myself, and I tend not to make progress in those kinds of goals because there's no number to hit and I don't know how to make a plan to reach it. So my question is, how do I make a plan to achieve those kind of goals?
If you can identify exactly what it is that makes you want to improve something, and you think of an application of it. For instance, if, let's just say, in interpersonal relationships, maybe you don't like the way that you deal with some people. Maybe your parents or a friend or something like that. Maybe you get too familiar and then you say something harsh. Is that possible? Yeah, familiarity breeds contempt. There's some sense like that. And if you say, in circumstances when I am irritated by my mother, I don't even know if that's possible with your mother because she's so nice. But let's say I'm irritated with a friend or a peer. And normally you might pass a comment and say something cruel or harsh or something like that. You could say then, in those times when I feel that impulse, I'm going to step back and do it differently. I'll give you an example of what I do. I get irritated when I'm driving and people don't use their turn signal. They're just like, because I always use my turn signal. Because I just think, even if I think nobody's behind me, maybe somebody is. And I want to make sure they know I'm turning, because it really bugs me when somebody just moves into the next lane. So, and I have my wife here as a witness, that whenever I'm driving or whenever she's driving or anybody else is driving, if there's some annoying situation on the road or even dangerous, whenever it happens, have you ever had this experience and then there's a reaction like, why you? The mind might say that. I always say, I forgive you. I just put my hand up. I say, Nirkula, witness. I was driving with a friend. He was driving, and he tends to get annoyed with drivers. And somebody came close, and I could tell he was angry. And I said, "We forgive you." And he looked at me. He never forgot it. He always mentions it. It's like, I remember that happened. That changed my life, he said. And so if you find out, identify what it is that bugs you about what you're doing in a certain way, how you're dealing with people, or what you say to people in a certain circumstances, or the way you think about things, and you can identify that, and then find the way Krishna talks about how to amend that. For instance, he gives these practical tips in the Bhagavad Gita about, here are the austerities of the mind. One of the austerities of the mind is satisfaction. Who knew it was a practice? I used to think satisfaction has to mean either I'm satisfied or I'm not. It's not up to my standard. We'll change your standard. And you can adjust everything. So if you find that quality that you want, and then you find out where it would be most represented in your life. As Krishna says at the end of the 12th chapter, he gives these points about how you should interact with people. And he says, don't become your enemy's enemy. If somebody becomes your enemy, don't start building up your military force to blast them back. And he says, a person who's satisfied with anything. So you move in a hotel room and you turn on the sink and it's boiling hot water, like in the last room. I turned on the sink. It was boiling hot water. Didn't matter where you put the thing. What to speak of, the shower didn't drain, so I was walking in this, pool in there, and I could have just said, "Oh, this is horrible. I got to get out of here. Get me another hotel or whatever." Krishna said he's satisfied with everything. So I just said, yeah, okay, I'll practice satisfaction, and I'll like it. I remember during the pandemic, all the soap was sold out in the whole world. You couldn't buy soap. I looked online. I wanted this certain kind of soap I use. It's kind of natural. But every category on Amazon, it was just sold out. There was only one left, and it was obviously a scent they made that was a mistake. That's all I could get, and I wanted soap because I was like, I got to wash my hands. So I ordered it, and I made this determination. I don't care how it smells, I'm going to like it. And I smelled it, and my mind's going, are you sure? I said, nope, I like this. And I changed my mind, and I liked it. I mean, our minds are malleable, our lives are malleable, and if we decide how we want it to change ourselves according to Krishna's instructions, it's exciting. It's really, every day becomes a challenge. If you just go through the same way every day and say the same things that your tongue prompts you to say in response without thinking about it, how boring is that? But if you decide, I'm going to improve my life, and the best way to improve your life is to follow Lord Chaitanya's example. See what he said, see what Krishna said, and say, I'm going to be like that. I'm going to be like Prabhupada and follow that. And it's very practical, because we interact with people all the time, and if we do the things that Krishna says to do, then we'll start noticing that Gyatvam Shantam Richati, I actually feel more peaceful. Okay, a couple more? Yes?
This question relates more to the class you gave in the morning about Narada Muni's life. And so I was wondering, more related to what kinds of goals to set, especially in terms of our spiritual category, because Narada Muni, in a very short span of time, for what it seemed in the chapter, he was able to achieve a very advanced stage in his spiritual life. And so, since most of us have been born in a devotee family and so on, that's likely because of previous lives, credit that we've had. We've done devotional service, but we haven't been able to fully get there. We're at some stage, but how do we jumpstart and go to a place where like Narad, when he just immediately, very quickly was able to reach a very advanced stage, what would you say is very important to focus on in the different kinds of practices that we have available, like reading, chanting, service, and so on? There's so many opportunities. Where should we spend our time to really go very quickly in advance?
To be grateful for what you have now. Practice gratitude. Because you're always somewhere. And if you're always looking, oh, it's not good enough, it's too slow, I've got to go somewhere else, then you always feel a little out of balance. But if you're grateful for what you have right now, then in the present moment you'll appreciate exactly what Krishna's given you. I have a friend who taught me this practice. When he wakes up in the morning, he stands in front of a picture of Prabhupada. He says, thank you, Srila Prabhupada. And I started noticing, I started doing that also, and then I noticed too, whenever my mind gets anxious, I'll start saying, thank you, Krishna, thank you, Krishna, thank you, Krishna. And then it changes into Hare Krishna, and I'm chanting with this mood of thank you, Krishna. And it really helps to have gratitude for what you are right now. This idea of going faster and I'm not there yet, or there, what's there? I mean, idea of being somewhere else all the time is a little exhausting. Just be here and appreciate for what you have right now, and you're a lot more effective in doing whatever you do, because when you appreciate that you've been given, as we were doing inventory for Srikar this morning, we could have still been sitting here listing off things that he could be grateful for. When you start doing that, you're much more effective in your practice, because you're situated in the present moment and appreciating what you have now. And that's something that is practical. You can practice at any moment. And in fact, when you're chanting and you're expressing gratitude to Krishna, it's a very potent way to chant. If you're chanting and you're thinking, how come I'm not a pure devotee? Or how come I'm not rolling on the floor crying? Then you may feel just dissatisfied, and it's really a mental concoction anyway. Because everything comes by Krishna's mercy. It's not like academics where if you jam a little harder, maybe you can squeeze out I don't know, is there a 4.1 after a 4.0? And, we can transfer that idea to devotional service. Try to be good devotee. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, don't try to be a great devotee. Just try to be a good devotee. And do the best you can. And if you're honest and sincere, that's the most important thing. And you do what you can with your adhikari. Sweswe adhikari anishta saguna parikirtita. Krishna tells us to Uddhava, be who you are now. And he gives, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita gives this example of climbing a ladder. He says, if you run up the ladder too fast, you can slip and fall off the ladder. He said, on the other hand, if you go too slow, you've got your foot on a rung and you know it's solid, but then you hesitate going to the next rung. He said, then your advancement will be too slow. He said it'll be distant. So he said, just take a practical approach to your devotional life. You're on a rung. At least you're on a rung. I remember amongst some of Prabhupada's godbrothers, there was this conversation. And some devotees had taken shelter of some of Prabhupada's godbrothers after Prabhupada left. And then there was one devotee who was famous for deity worship. And then another one who was a great scholar and a philosopher. He was talking about, in an innocuous way, what the different categories of devotees were, the Kanishna, Adhikari, Madhyama, Uttama, and so forth. And he pointed out this person who was fully into deity worship, that he was a Kanishna. But it had nothing to do with criticism or anything, but some of the followers of that person heard that, oh, he said, my guru is a Kanishna. And they got so upset, so they ran to their mentor and they said, such and such said you were Kanishna. And he said, he has given me some adhikari? In other words, like, wow, he gave me a level somewhere in devotional service. It's a very high level that be considered that you have some adhikari for something. He didn't think, like, how come you didn't say I was an uttama adhikari? How come you didn't say I was a paramahamsa and a pure devotee? And none of the devotees that Narada interviews, when he's trying to find out who has the most mercy in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, everyone says, me? You're kidding me, right? No. Go for him or her. They're the ones with the most mercy. And when he gets all the way to Goloka Vrindavan and it's the gopis, who are we? We're servants of everybody else. And so be satisfied with what adhikari you have now. Krishna says it's a good quality. Swe swe adhikari yanishta saguna parikirtina. It's a guna, it's a good quality. And do what you can with what you have now and just be a simple, nice devotee and be good. And everything will come in due course of time by Krishna's mercy. No race to the top, because there is no top. The more you advance in devotional service, says Narada in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the more you think you're less qualified than everybody else. Not that there's this race to Uttama Adhikaridam, and once you get there, you won, and you got the 4.0 and you're going to get paid more, or something like that. It doesn't work like that. Okay, just a couple more. Yes.
Hare Krishna. When I reflect on the past year, I feel like there's a lot of gaps or places of improvement, and there's so many that I tend to get overwhelmed and I can't pick which goals I should specifically focus on. So how can I pick the right ones for the next year?
That's why I said write your priority list first. It takes a lot of thought to write your priorities, but when you do, that really helps you to figure out what to pick. And it'll help you through your life, how you make decisions. Nirkula and I, as we've had to make a lot of decisions, came to this settled way of making decisions, which is we'll calculate it by what's best for our service. And for instance, buying a house, we looked around the Bay Area and there were places that we could afford a house, barely, but they were way outside the chakra of service that we had. And then there were houses that we couldn't afford that were within that. And we chose the one that we couldn't afford. Because, and it wasn't a financial decision that, we had no idea that our area or particular area, and this is true, had the most property appreciation of anywhere else in the world practically over a 20-year time. We didn't even consider that. We just thought we want to be close to service, so we bought a smaller place, but it was way more expensive than what we could have got somewhere else. But the decision was based on, if we move way far out, are we really going to show up for our service? But if we are there, then it's 5-7 minutes away. And it all turned out fine. So we just decided that this is how we'll make our decisions, is what's best for my service. And you can never go wrong when you do that. And if you write your priorities first, then it makes it a lot easier to set goals. There's no clock in here, so we'll be here all night. Yes. Anybody else on this side, so we line up? Yes. Okay, 1, 2.
What happens if when we have a longer term goal, like a 1-month goal or a 1-year goal, where we get maybe a quarter of a way in or a half a way in, we fail, then we're like, okay, I'm going to restart this, or I'm going to continue this. It's just one failure, I'm going to continue. And then it keeps happening again and again and again. And you get to the point where I'm just going to trash this goal. This was a like unsuccessful goal. And it could even be like a small goal. It's like could be just saying thank you to Krishna every day, and then you just fail.
I find that when I fall off from a goal, that it's always there waiting for me when I want to come back. And I find also when I fail in doing it, and then I'm able to come back to it again, then I develop a little more insight into how to stick with it or how to adjust it so that I can do it. And oftentimes we move forward in fits and starts. It's not always a neat process. Prabhupada gave this little anecdote once when there was this Indian man who liked Prabhupada, and he had gone to a Gaudiya Math place for Janmashtami, and they were criticizing Prabhupada because some of his godbrothers made it their profession to criticize everything Prabhupada did. And a newspaper article had come out about how the devotees had gotten in some trouble in Japan, and some of them were asked to leave. And so during the Janmashtami, he brought it out to show the audience that, see, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, his people are like black sheep, he said, and they got kicked out of Japan. So this man was really disturbed, and he came back to Prabhupada and said, this godbrother was criticizing you to the audience in Janmashtami. And he brought out this article about getting kicked out of Japan. And one of the devotees there who was on the Japan project said, but Prabhupada, it's not true, we didn't really get... Prabhupada said, that is all right. He said, once there was a man, and he was talking to this other man, and he said, I've just lost 10,000. And the other man said to him, well, you're lucky, because I didn't even have 10,000 to lose. So Prabhupada said he is criticizing that we got kicked out of Japan. He said, but at least we were there to get kicked out. And so, so what, you get knocked off your thing? At least you made a stand. And if you keep making a stand, you'll find that, as Prabhupada writes in the Light of the Bhagavat, there's a beautiful purport there where he says, failure may not be detrimental. It may become the pillar to success. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, there's never any failure for somebody who's sincere. For somebody who actually sincerely tries, you can never fail. So if you're trying to advance in devotional service and you're trying to organize your life in such a way that all the pieces work so you can represent the sampradaya and be there, even the failures, Krishna will find ways. They're like fodder. What is it? Compost. All the stuff you throw away, if you put it in a box. Did you know this? You put it in a box. I got a book during the pandemic when I got really into gardening. It was called Compost Anything. And the guy had this thing, hey, whole world's organic, it'll all decompose eventually. Just put it in a box and walk away. So all the times that we fail and we think, oh, it's compost. You take that, you put it in a box, and you say, okay, then nutrient-rich experience comes out of that, so that you can use it in other places. Otherwise, we just give in to fatalism that I can't do anything. But you can. And there's step-by-step way to do it, and Krishna will help you. Okay, last one. Yes. Mukund Hari, good to see you way back there. I only ever see you, it's midnight in London, and you joined Youth Jam at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in California.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
A little bit to do with this session, but a little bit with the afternoon in the Chakra building. So I was reflecting a bit on scale when it comes to ambition and setting goals. Obviously, here in Sridham Mayapur, appreciating just the enormity of Prabhupada's creation and what he's built, and with the TOVP and everything. I find this a bit conflicting for me personally, that on one side, externally, we seem to reward acres of land, dollars of money, number of books, but by principle, successes in, as you said, determination, the endeavor, or having that sincerity. And I don't mean to say this in a means to compare, but to just take positive inspiration from that to do something big and meaningful for the movement. But at the same time, I appreciate goals need to be achievable and realistic, lest we set very lofty goals and don't end up achieving them and become a bit disappointed. So what's kind of your guidance, Maharaj, for goals, taking inspiration, but knowing what to do about scale, as well as taking the joy and the success of the endeavor and the determination?
Well, you can always start with your japa. Because if you work from the point of the most important core activity, chanting Hare Krishna is the most important thing. And if you try to get better at that, then everything else will improve and your perspective will be balanced. And I know oftentimes we compare ourselves to other people and what they've done. But if you go deeply within it, they have their problems too. The world's the world and we're in it. And the most important aspect for us, the most important position for us, is to be sincere devotees and try to chant Hare Krishna with sincerity. Big projects come and go. Big achievers sometimes don't achieve, and sometimes they are up and sometimes they're down. And the devotees I know that I admire the most and are very successful devotionally are ones that have a good sense of themselves and are very humble. So when Krishna gives us the opportunity, we do the best we can with what we have. Brahma thought that he had achieved a lot by creating a universe, and he came to see Krishna with a sense of, here I am. If you've ever had that sense, yeah, I just showed up, here I am. Yeah, I'm the guy who made the universe. Krishna could sense that, and so he said, he just called with his mind all the other Brahmas. And they all showed up, and our Brahma has 4 heads, but in other universes are much bigger. And so some of them had 8 heads, some of them had 50 heads, some of them had 10 million heads. And Brahma then, after all of them came, all the Brahmas offered their obeisances to Krishna. And our little Brahma said he felt like a mosquito in a herd of elephants. So it's in the poem, the Kevala Namashtakam. If you ever read that poem, it's really beautiful about the holy name. It's not attributed to a particular author, but in it, it mentions that when one starts to experience the beauty of the holy name, then he considers all the wealth in the world to be like straw on the street. And if we have a sense for what's really important, which is that we're just sincere and we try to please Krishna the best of our ability, then things are in the right proportion. And after all, Krishna wasn't enamored of Duryodhana's offer for, come to my palace, I'll serve you a big feast, but he went to Vidura's house, and Vidura was so sincerely nervous that Krishna had come to his house that he was handing over the banana peels instead of the bananas. And Krishna wouldn't go to Duryodhana's house, but he went there and ate banana peels at Vidura's house. Ashnami means I eat, as in patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya priyachati. That same verse is there almost verbatim in the story of Sudamba Brahman. And Ashnami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna is so pleased when a devotee just in a heartfelt way offers something that's out of love. He says, Ashnami means if you offer flour, Krishna, out of a sense of bewilderment because of his devotee's gesture of offering it in love, he'll eat the flour. Even though, I know I'm talking about an edible flour. Of course, Krishna can eat anything. And that's what's important. And I've seen, we've been in eras in ISKCON where it was all about the project, and then you end up leaving behind the devotees. They get ground up and put into the mortar so they can keep building. And I've seen God brothers who have been through that era and said, okay, I'll just do the opposite. We'll honor the spark of enthusiasm in the hearts of the devotees. And they have the most success in the way that they're able to coalesce the devotees who sincerely want to serve Krishna. That's what's important. I mean, sometimes we're looking into developing, we're in the process of developing a larger property for ISV because right now it's too small. And of course, I remember the first day we opened this temple about 10 years ago, and we were having a mela there, and somebody came up, tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need a bigger place. But there was this mantra people always say and still do, we need a bigger place. And I said, define big. What does it mean? Because I've seen really big places, and then the mood is dead. As you walk in, nobody makes eye contact, and there's not a sense of motivation for preaching, doing good for others. And so what? You've got some bricks piled on top of each other. Is that big? What's really big is spirit that one develops within one's heart. And if you have that, then naturally so many other things come. But we never think that it's good enough to offer to Krishna that I've done something big. It's always insignificant because it all belongs to Krishna, and he's the one who gives all the intelligence.